Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 186 of the podcast. And in this episode of the podcast, I'm talking about Urban Meyer being fired as head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars before the end of his very first season with the team. Urban Meyer was 2-11 and in the first year of a 5-year contract with the team, and absolutely nothing went his way. His tenure began with the Tim Tebow as tight end fiasco. This should have been the first red flag that Urban Meyer would never work out as an NFL head coach. He signed a guy who is super controversial. Whether you like Tim Tebow or not, he gets a lot of unwarranted attention. I mean, nobody would have cared who the fifth tight end of the Jacksonville Jaguars was unless his name was Tim Tebow. Remember, Tim Tebow could not even be a backup quarterback for the Jets or a backup for the Patriots without a lot of media coverage. He has become more of a celebrity than he is a football player, and for Urban Meyer not to recognize that, yes, I know Urban Meyer was his head coach when he was in college. I know Tim Tebow is a Heisman winner. I know that I care about loyalty to a certain degree, but this was a stupid decision by Urban Meyer to let Tim Tebow be a tight end. I mean, Tim Tebow has been known for wanting to play baseball these last few years. More people were talking about Tim Tebow than they were Trevor Lawrence, who the Jaguars took number 1 overall. That is bonkers, and Urban Meyer should have been able to see that coming. He should have given Tim Tebow a job on the team without it being a tight end. He doesn't need to be a player on the roster. Make him an ambassador for your team. Make him an assistant coach that doesn't really do anything. It could have been literally anything else, but put him in a position which he's never played before, tight end, and expect us to take it seriously. That was a confounding decision made by Urban Meyer, and the first warning sign that he wasn't going to make it as an NFL head coach. And then he made an even worse decision by dancing with someone at a nightclub who was not his wife in a really creepy manner. Urban Meyer should know better. Urban Meyer should know that coaches are held to a way higher standard in the NFL than players are. I don't think the Tim Tebow situation, the losing, and him being unfaithful to his wife are the reasons he's no longer the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the biggest reason Urban Meyer is no longer the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars is because no one on that team likes him, period. No one on that team was his ally. Nobody liked him as a human being. You can survive those type of situations in sports if you have people on your side, and Urban Meyer had no one on his side. He was so unlikable. There are reports that he was threatening to fire his assistant coaches after the preseason. There's a lot to unpack here with this firing and a lot of reasons why this didn't work out, and a lot of it might be that Meyer is just not a good person, which is a very valid point. I think a lot of this has to do with him being a college head coach who had tons of success. These guys, Nick Saban with the Dolphins, Steve Spurrier for Washington, Bobby Petrino with the Falcons, Lane Kiffin with the Raiders, college coaches, in my opinion, for the most part, do not succeed in the NFL with very few exceptions. Jimmy Johnson and Pete Carroll, they're Super Bowl winners. They've won in college because in college they have it. It's this my way or the highway type of coaching lifestyle. I mean, they can get away with murder and still be the dictator of these teams. In college football circles, Urban Meyer is a legend. He's like a 2-time national championship winning head coach, but in the NFL, he's just another guy. Again, like I said, he has this dictator-like mentality when he's running his football teams, and that works in college football because the head coach is the face of the franchise. But in the NFL, with millionaire athletes and billionaire owners, no one is going to put up with that type of attitude without instant success. And that's my other reason why this is a colossal failure, because Urban Meyer was not patient. I feel like none of these coaches who come to the NFL from college are patient. They think they're going to have that instant success like they did in college. These guys like Urban Meyer and Nick Saban are not used to losing a single game a season in college football. So how can you expect them to go to the NFL and lose 11 games and be happy about it and not be total divas? These guys are used to getting what they want, and that's why they don't last in the NFL. Again, Saban and Petrino lasted 1 year. Kiffin lasted less than a year and a half in the NFL. Spurrier lasted 2 seasons. Meyer had this win now attitude with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had this I'm going to be the savior of this football team type of attitude, and you can't have that attitude in the NFL. I think the coaches that go from college to the NFL that do well are patient. Remember when Pete Carroll went to the Seahawks, they were not a win now football team. He was there through some of the losing, and then he got Russell Wilson and he turned it around. Remember, Jimmy Johnson went to the Cowboys. They were a laughing stock. They won 1 football game his first year with the team. Then they became a dynasty with Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, and Emmitt Smith. Urban Meyer was putting all of this pressure on his NFL coaches and his players to win games right now, because when they lost, he acted like the sky was falling. And you cannot have that attitude, especially when you are the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, a franchise that never has won. Urban Meyer should have been trying to play the long game with the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he tried to win now and it really blew up in his face. Also, most of these college coaches who go to the NFL end up leaving the NFL in embarrassing fashion. Look at Saban. Saban took the Alabama job after he said he had no interest and he was going to remain the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. I mean, that's one of the biggest failures. Nobody talks about it because Saban has gone back to college football and become the best coach, but that was an embarrassing situation. Steve Spurrier in Washington was criticized for having a bunch of his former college players on his NFL roster. Bobby Petrino left the Falcons mid-season to go back to college, and Lane Kiffin was fired in London. That's another reason why college coaches are risky hires, because they always have the avenue to return to college football. I want a coach where his NFL job is everything to him. Why do college coaches make the jump to the NFL, you ask? There are lots of reasons. The biggest reason being the NFL does pay way more money. The average coach in the NFL makes $6.6 million, while the average coach in college is around $1 million. The highest paid NFL coach, Bill Belichick, makes $18 million. However, he's also the GM, while in college, Saban makes $9 million. Both the average tenure of a head coach in college football and the NFL is around 4 years, but I feel like in college football, you get rewarded for winning. They keep you around for winning. Think about this. Brian Kelly was with the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame for almost a decade, and he never won a national championship, but he routinely won a lot of games. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles when Nick Foles was their quarterback, and he only coached the Eagles for 5 years. Kelly was able to leave Notre Dame after a decade, taking a better job while Peterson was fired. College coaches can seemingly leave for better jobs whenever they want. You never seen an NFL coach under contract leave for a better NFL franchise. I mean, the only example I can think of is when Bill Belichick resigned as Jets head coach and then went on to coach the Patriots. But otherwise, it never happens. It feels like college coaches only want to be in the NFL because it's like the next job up. I mean, that's the mentality of the college football head coach. They're always trying to get the best next job. And that's not the right mentality, where the NFL head coaches want to be with that franchise for a long period of time. I mean, Bill Belichick has been with the Patriots for 20 years. Mike Tomlin has been with the Steelers for 10 years. Those are the type of guys you want to coach your NFL franchise, not a guy in Urban Meyer who's always trying to get the next step up. I mean, he had a job in Florida, then he went to Ohio State. He's always looking to get a leg up on the next job. It's about that title. It's about that job, where the NFL head coach is trying to create a winning organization. That's what Bill Belichick is trying to do with the Patriots. That's what Mike Tomlin is trying to do with the Steelers, and they've succeeded because they're in it for the long game, and that's something that these college coaches lack. Look at how differently people are reacting to Brian Kelly being a tyrant to his assistants in college and nothing happening to him except he's being mocked. He's going to continue to act that way with his new job at LSU. This behavior is accepted in college football, and clearly it's not accepted in the NFL. Think about all the controversies Meyer endured in college without losing his job. He acted this way for decades and never suffered the consequences. I also want to say this: the Jaguars knew he wasn't a decent guy the same way the Raiders knew John Gruden was not a decent guy. They were just so desperate to be relevant, they got the big name. Oh, Urban Meyer wants to make the jump to the NFL? That will get everyone's attention. I mean, we've always been obsessed whether or not these college coaches can make the jump to the pros. It happens in college basketball as well. There's always been this obsession over Coach K coaching the pros. Oh, Coach K is going to coach the Lakers. I can't wait to see if he can win with the Lakers like he does in Duke. And the answer is he obviously can't win in that same way, because college basketball and college football are completely different sports than the NFL and the NBA. I'll tell you right now why Coach K would never work in the NBA, because he would get to a team coached by somebody like LeBron and they would be the guy making all of the decisions about the roster. And Coach K is not used to that. He's used to being the guy. He's used to being the guy who gets rewarded for all of the success. And it's the same way with Urban Meyer. When he wins a national championship in college football, he gets all of the credit because the rosters change year in and year out and he continues to win, so he's going to get all the credit. Where if you win a Super Bowl in the NFL, you know who gets the credit? The players, the quarterback. I think a really interesting way to look at this is college football is kind of like what the NFL used to be. Remember, the NFL used to be a place where a guy was the head coach of a team for decades and he was revered. You had Vincent Lombardi with the Packers, you had Chuck Noll with the Steelers, you had Tom Landry with the Cowboys. These guys were the faces of the NFL, but now it's no longer that way. The players are the selling point. Andy Reid is not the selling point for the Chiefs. It's about Patrick Mahomes. It's about the players on the field. And in college football, it's not about the players on the field. It's still about the coaches. And I think this needs to be said. This is not all about Meyer. The Jacksonville Jaguars got exactly what they deserved because they made this hiring for attention and not for winning football games. Since Shad Khan took ownership of the team in 2012, the Jags have had 6 different head coaches and the team has a record of 41-116. They are one of the worst franchises in football, so it makes sense they would make a hire like this and that it would blow up in their face. Still though, it's shocking that it blew up so quickly. There's nothing positive that came out of this situation whatsoever. No one played well under Urban Meyer. It's not like Trevor Lawrence was lighting it up and now we're going to hire the next coach and he's going to continue to progress. Nothing went well out of this situation. Nobody improved. Nobody feels good right now. You should not feel good about the future of the Jacksonville Jaguars at this moment. All in all, being a good college football head coach does not get you ready for the NFL, and the NFL will continue to go after these big-time college football head coaches, Dabo Swinney, Lincoln Riley, James Franklin, and those rarely are the best hires. The people these teams need to hire are the coaches that are already in the NFL. Look at these recent hires: Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. Those 3 were the best 3 recent hires I could think of, and all 3 were NFL coordinators. They were used to the NFL mentality. They knew they were going to go into those organizations and they were going to have to manage egos and make people like them. Look at the job Mike Tomlin has done. At one point on the Steelers were Big Ben, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell. He was able to manage those massive egos and make that team a winning franchise. He was able to run an organization. Yes, there were scandals with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they've always been winning under Mike Tomlin. And other than that silly little tripping incident, Mike Tomlin has never been the face of the scandal. The problem with Urban Meyer, he was the face of every single scandal that went on with him and the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was his fault for bringing Tim Tebow onto the roster. It was his fault for dancing with that woman who wasn't his wife. It's his fault that none of his NFL assistants liked him as a human being because he was terrible to all of them. It feels like the NFL looks at these guys like Saban and Meyer and looks at their record and they go, look, Nick Saban never loses a football game. Urban Meyer never loses a football game. But they're not fit to be leaders in the NFL. They're fit to be leaders when it's the my way or the highway mentality, and that's just not how it is in the NFL, and I don't think it even should be that way in college football. Because let's be frank here for a minute, a lot of their success, Saban and Meyer, has to do with where they're coaching. Every kid wants to go play for Alabama. Every kid wants to go play for Florida. Every kid wants to go play for Ohio State. Guess what? Every NFL player does not want to play for the Miami Dolphins. Not every NFL player wants to play for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you actually have to do something and make NFL players want to go play in those places. And Saban could not do that in Miami, and Urban Meyer failed at that miserably with the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is one of the worst coaching hires in the history of the NFL, because if they just hired someone else and remained bad, nobody would have cared. But they hired this guy, and he's made them a laughing stock. Let's end the podcast by talking about where the Jags should go from here, and I think the answer is simple. Hire the best coaching candidate who can get the best out of Trevor Lawrence. He is the future of your franchise. He's your number one draft pick, and he's also the only reason a decent head coach will give this job any consideration. He struggled a bit as a rookie with 9 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, but still, any coach would want the chance to work with someone as talented as he is. And it's a bit early to say this because he's only a rookie, but if the Jags get this next hire wrong, there is a likelihood that Trevor Lawrence will want nothing to do with this organization. I mean, think about how bad his first year with the Jacksonville Jaguars has been. Again, he had to go to a franchise he probably want nothing to do with just because he was the number one draft pick. He did the decent thing and did not ask for a trade out the way Eli Manning wanted nothing to do with the Chargers and then went to New York. He didn't pull a Dan Marino. He stayed loyal to a team he's never played for. He decided, hey, I'm going to be a member of the Jaguars, and it's pretty much blown up in his face. They hire a coach who won in college football and ended up being a maniac. This is just another example of it's not about talent your rookie season as a quarterback in the NFL. It's all about the situation you are in. Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Justin Fields are all on teams that have constant turnovers on leadership positions like head coach, offensive coordinator, and general manager. The rookie quarterbacks who do well are part of stable franchises. We should all have faith in Trevor Lawrence. He has the talent. The problem is his team will likely fail him over and over and over again. Teams like the Jaguars do not learn from their mistakes. They're going to go out there and they're going to try to make the splashy hire when they should go after somebody who's going to turn Trevor Lawrence into the franchise quarterback we all know he's capable of being. I think the lesson here is, for the most part, the NFL should avoid hiring the coaching titans of college football. The Nick Sabans, the Steve Spurriers, the Urban Meyers do not work in the National Football League because, again, they have this my way or the highway mentality. They are the biggest reasons for their team's success in college football, and that's just not the case in the NFL. And the few coaches who do well in the NFL from college, Pete Carroll and Jimmy Johnson, they love being around their players. They do not treat their players like employees. Pete Carroll acts like he's one of the guys. Jimmy Johnson acted like he was a member of the Dallas Cowboys. He didn't act like he was the Dallas Cowboys. That's one of the biggest issues Urban Meyer had. He acted like he was the Jacksonville Jaguars instead of acting like he was one of the guys. And the other reason is because they're not used to losing. Nick Saban is never used to losing football games. Urban Meyer is not used to losing football games. And the minute that happened with the Dolphins for Saban, and the minute it happened with Urban Meyer and the Jaguars, they were looking at it as a way out. I do feel like Urban Meyer did not want to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars for the next 5 years. He just wanted his money, and he just wanted the title of being a coach in the NFL. He reached his goal. He got that next big job, and now he's probably looking for the next one. That's my biggest issue with these guys. franchise. They're always looking for the way out. They're always looking for that next job. That's not who you want as an NFL head coach. At all costs, the NFL should avoid hiring college football head coaches who have a history of winning a lot. Urban Meyer was too used to getting his way, and when he didn't get what he wanted, what did he do? He acted in a stupid way and kicked the team kicker. He acted like a child. That's not who you want as your coach of your NFL franchise. What you want is someone who's a great coach in the good times and the bad times. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.